Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well whenever you are choosing to listen and watch this. I wanted to start out with a quick definition of creativity. Of course, there are many different definitions that you might hear or think of when you're learning and talking about creativity, as is creativity is its own creation, but I wanted to share a little bit about Steinberg and his thoughts. Robert Steinberg really came up with this theory of successful intelligence, and it's all supportive of creativity, and creativity being the ability to produce original work that fits within a particular task or domain constraints. And so this is all about original thinking related to a task or problem that someone is trying to solve. So really seeing problems in a new light and coming up with creative or various ways of thinking about how to solve a problem, seeing the value in your own ideas, and also being able to persuade others that your ideas are innovative and creative. So feel free to check out this video here if you'd like to learn more about Robert Steinberg's perspective and his theory of successful intelligence related to creativity. Okay, so wanted to start us off with a little bit of fun and giving you the opportunity to try out a creative game. So you may or may not have heard of categories before. If you have, awesome. If not, we're going to do a little trial for you. So on this slide, it's just getting us introduced, and then on slides 5 and 6 will be the instructions for the game. So if you already own the game at home, that's awesome. You're more than welcome to use it. But if you don't, I've created a smaller version applicable for our class being online and everything like that. So this slide is just to get us introduced, and we're going to get more into essential elements of creativity on the next few slides. So it'll start to tie in on slide 7, but on slides 5 and 6 will be the instructions for the game. So check that out. Okay, so here are the instructions for the game, and then on slide 6 are the different categories. So first you're going to find someone to play with, or a group of people to play with. Grab a piece of paper, something to write with, and you're going to choose one of the following letters, just one to start with. Feel free if you want to play multiple times, that's awesome too. But you're going to choose one of the letters, and then you're going to set a timer or stopwatch for 3 minutes, and then you're going to use the letter of your choosing. So for example, I might choose A, and then you're going to write down everything that you can think of for for one of the phrases, the categories on the next slide. So you're going to pick one of the categories, and you're going to pick one of the letters. So I might pick letter A, and then I would look at slide 6, and I might pick things that things you store items in. And so I would write down within those 3 minutes everything I can think of that I might store items in, starting with the letter A. And so within those 3 minutes, you're going to write as many things down as you can, and then compare and contrast your answers with someone else. And then you'll have to cross out every single answer that you have that's the same, because we're trying to see the creativity behind our answers. And so once you've crossed all those out, you'll see, okay, how many did I come up with that were original answers? And then feel free to try again with a different a different category and then different letters. So maybe for the next one, I choose letter F, and then I do historic events. And so you can play this game as many times as you want, but I remember for a long period of time in my childhood, this was a popular game that we would play because it really allowed everybody to come up with their own words, and based on our own knowledge and our experiences. And so on slide 7, it will tie in more, and once you've played the game, it will make more sense on why this is part of the essentials to creativity. Okay, so as I was saying, hopefully by now you have already played this categories game. But basically, the reason why I wanted you to try that out is because it's a fast thinking game, and it requires you to come up with creative ideas that support these essential abilities to creativity. So the first one is fluency. So referencing that Scattergories game, how many of the answers could you generate while playing Scattergories? So the ability for you to be able to produce a number of different ideas. So the key word here is different. How many different ideas were you able to come up with within each letter and within each category? And when you compared with somebody else, how many of those did you have to cross off? And then originality, how many things did you come up with that were novel or new? And were you able to come up with unique answers? I remember oftentimes playing games that revolved around creative thinking with my family, and we would all be astonished at the ones that my dad would come up with. So, for example, we played this game's categories, and the category at the time was U.S. states. And so he had wrote calm as in a state of mind, a state of being. And so that's just an original or novel idea that you wouldn't typically think of when you hear the category of states. Or I remember the one that has stuck with me that I crack up at, literally crack, you'll get in a sec, but we were playing 21 questions and we could not figure out what his answer was. And he had put that it was a meat, and we listed all the meats, and it was an egg. It was a liquid meat, and we debated for a long time over whether that was actually a valid answer. Same with the calm, the state of being. But it was original. They were original ideas, new, nobody thought of them, and they definitely stood out with out of the box thinking. And so that's really one of those essentials to creativity is originality. Did you come up with unique answers? Did you come up with something that was outside of the box? And then flexibility, so the ability to approach situations and develop solutions from a number of different perspectives. As you can see here, the word different and ideas are popping up a lot, and that's something about creativity that we often are missing in other types of developmental areas, that ability to come up with different perspectives. And so again, going back to this categories game, when coming up with answers, did you toss out your first idea and try to come up with one that was more creative? So when you originally wrote that idea down, did you think, oh, okay, this is a popular answer? So when we think of, fruits, apple, blueberry, but what about a kumquat? So those are some fruits that you might not hear of. Or is a mango a popular one? So there's different ways that we might switch our answers to come up with more flexibility. And then elaboration. Are you able to extend or expand on your ideas? So if you're asked a question about one of the answers that you provided, so when I was talking about the answer that my dad provided, was he able to give an explanation for his answer even if nobody else agrees? Going back to that original piece, that was your original novel answer. You came up with that when nobody else did. So tell us more about that. How did you come up with that? What made you think in that way? Because everyone else was thinking in a different way. And so that's really what creativity is. It's all of the thinking that you are coming up with all on your own. And we'll get more into that and a little bit on the next slides as well. All right. Sorry, I started to make the sentence go on, and I realized that I was jumping ahead onto the next slide without pausing the recording, so that's what happened there. But I wanted to share a little bit about imagination and creativity, specifically Vygotsky's understanding of our imagination and the two types of cognitive behaviors of reproduction and imagination. And so when we hear reproduction, that's the ability to reproduce. So we are almost copying and pasting or coming up with something that's already been produced before. So I might be copying someone else's drawing or their song. So we often see people that remake songs, or they might sing a song that has already been done before, or I'm painting something that's already been done. So it's a reproduction, a rendition of something. And then with imagination, this is when you are using your creativity. You're creating something new and unique. Now, granted, many things in the world have similarities, but your imagination allows you to come up with something that's not based on the picture right in front of you, and you are using your mind to think of things. And when we think of imagination, Vygotsky looked at the 4 different laws of imagination, that out of the box thinking, in how it fuels the production of creativity and creative products. And so oftentimes children need more opportunities for creative thinking because we live in a world where we do expect children to reproduce ideas. We do expect them to recall and remember specific dates in history and specific facts and formulas. And so they need more opportunities to think creatively and use their imaginations. And so he also realized that our creativity stems from our life experiences. So this imaginative process, it cannot happen unless we are utilizing our own personal life experiences of others, and then also our emotions. And so for me personally, I write poems in different states of mind. So if I'm feeling joyous, I write a poem that reflects that emotion. Same with if I'm feeling sad or depressed or overwhelmed, many different emotions and emotional experiences that I've had within my life. And my creative outlet, when I'm using my imagination to fuel that creative product of a poem, it's coming from my personal life experiences, my emotional experiences, or even others' life experiences. So I often reflect on periods of time with my family or stories that they've told me, and that's another way that I can fuel my journaling or my artwork. So many different ways that we might create products, different ways that our imagination can fuel art or music or poetry or dance or dramatic play. So many different ways and outlets that we might have for our creativity and our imagination. And so feel free to check out this article that expands a little bit more on Vygotsky and imaginative thinking. And also, finally, on this slide, really just thinking about imagination and creativity. Creativity is a cycle, and it is constantly flowing, where imagination fuels creativity and creativity fuels imagination, and it is just a constant flow back and forth. And so hopefully this image that I provided here for you can kind of help you to solidify that understanding of this circular process, that it is just constantly working through our lives over and over again. We are always using our imaginations and producing ideas and coming up with new ways to be creative. On this slide, I'd like to share a little bit about Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, and then also you'll see on slide 13, it's an extension of this slide, so feel free to check that one out while you're listening to this or post. And really, when we're thinking about Gardner's theories of multiple intelligences, creativity is an important aspect of measuring intelligence. We often don't see in IQ testing measures of intelligence in the form of creativity. We see it in mathematics, or we see it in spatial awareness, or other areas like math or history. And really what Howard Gardner was trying to gather is that we need new ways of learning and teaching that are beyond just those mathematics or those historical standards, and coming up again with that idea of original thinking beyond just copy paste. And so feel free to check out the article, and also Howard Gardner himself talking about multiple intelligences. And so he discusses different types. So bodily and kinesthetic intelligence, musical intelligence, naturalistic intelligence. So there's many different ways that humans can be intelligent and how they span across a variety of different creative aspects. So this slide is kind of an extension of what I was just discussing about IQ and creativity, and how we often see IQ testing or measures of intelligence to be limited in their facets of, things like short-term memory or analytic thinking, mathematics, spatial recognition, but some tests, such as the TTCT test, look specifically at creative potential for children, and you'll see on the next slide, on slide 15, I've given examples of this Stanford Binet test as well as the TTCT, and you're able to see how specific the Stanford test is in comparison to the creative thinking test, where it allows children to utilize those different elements that are central to creativity that we discussed earlier: fluency, flexibility, originality, elaboration. And you'll see just in the simple, test, how much creativity can be produced simply by looking at images and using different parts of your brain to come up with new novel ideas. And so take a peek at those and think about what you would create. I'm curious, if you were given a piece of paper. I remember I went to a conference and it was on creativity, and I was given a piece of paper with a bunch of circles on it, and there was a timer set for, I think, 1 minute, and I was told, use these circles, create something out of these circles. And everybody was given the opportunity to utilize them in whatever way we wanted. So some people drew suns, some people made cookies, some people made whole scenes inside, some people connected the circles together. So there was so many different ways to get creative and utilize these circles beyond just matching them or talking about the circumference of them. So there's ways to measure creativity, and this was one of them, and I found it fascinating to do, and I would highly recommend that you try this out for yourself if you're interested in testing out your own creativity. On this slide, I have a couple different TED Talks for you to listen to, and the second TED Talk by George Land will connect you with the little quiz here, and so feel free to check these out to really dive more into creativity and how sometimes we see that creativity increases with age, but also there are periods in our time of our lives where this may fluctuate throughout childhood, and there might be slumps through childhood and adolescence in our creativity, or spikes in it, and this could be dependent on our own experiences, our school systems, many different things that might create some spikes or slumps in creativity. And then also, we are looking at how when children are younger, things seem more novel to them, and the world is a new place for them. And so in our creative work and our imagination, we're learning about the world, and we're coming up with things that are meaningful to us and help us to better understand the world. And so it's a lot easier for younger children to come up with new and novel ideas. They're not necessarily as worried about testing out their ideas or what others will think, or that their ideas will be, quote unquote, wrong. And they're able to engage in more divergent thinking. And we want children of all ages, and really humans in general, to engage in divergent thinking. It's an important process for us to come up with diverse and new ways of solving problems and have more freedom to think, where convergent thinking is the opposite. It's specific, familiar ways to solve a problem. And another conference, I think it was the same year, I went to another session, and in this session, we were tested to use our creativity and our divergent thinking to build a boat. And so we were given a bunch of random materials in a baggie, and we were asked to come up with a way to create a boat that could float on water. And so there were a few rules so that we didn't all create the same thing, or I can't remember off the top of my head, but there were a few rules that we had to follow. But other than that, it was completely open-ended. We had a straw, we had some tin foil, we had popsicle sticks. So there were many different things. I think some string, so a lot of different materials, and we were asked to come up with a way to solve the problem. We needed to get our boat to float and move across the water, and so every table had some time to work on this, and by the time we were done working, all of our ideas combined together created something different. Every table group had a slightly different version of a boat, and it was fascinating to see how all of their creative minds, including myself and the ones in my group, how we all came up with something. We had the freedom to design and discover new ways of building one simple thing. So if we were given specific instructions on how to build this boat, step 1, you have to do this, step 2, you have to do this, that would be a familiar and specific way to solve a problem, and it would not allow us to have creativity in the process and use our imagination and thinking about different ways to solve this problem. And so feel free, again, like I said, to check out the 2 TED Talks. They're informative. They're about, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes each, and then check out that quiz just to help support your learning a bit more. Okay, so this slide is just some general stages of creativity pulled from your textbook, as you can see here, from 387 to 388, and we're really thinking about the 3 phases, so exploration, non-representational, and representational, and these general stages can help you to support the creativity skills on the next few slides. So children in the exploration stage are really just exploring with materials, investigating their properties. So as you can see here, I put a picture of color mixing, so they might be figuring out what happens when 2 colors are mixed together, how colors feel when they're mixed together, the feeling of paint in general, the exploration of the properties. So how does paint feel? What is this color? Really just exploring, again, the materials. And the non-representational phase, children might create things intentionally, but they could be unrecognizable. And this is also another way of thinking of process art, which is something that we really want to strive for children to be able to do, enjoying the process. And we sometimes think of this as abstract art. And oftentimes, there's not really a specific way to delineate what children have created. And we might ask them, tell me about your artwork. What have you created here? And we may add representation through audio or video or even words on the page to help children to represent their artwork in a different way. But really, this is an open-ended creation that doesn't have a right or wrong answer. And even in the representational phase, even though children are deliberately setting out to create something, there's still no right or wrong answer. As you can see here, the child has created a bird, but if they wanted to say it's a chicken or they wanted to say it's a duck, that's their own representation of it. And so many different ways that we can represent art and come up with creative pieces in general. Okay, so on this slide and the next few slides, we're going to talk about 4 and 5-year-olds and their creative skills. So on this slide, we're looking specifically at creativity skills related to representational art, and we talked about that as one of those general stages, but I really wanted to emphasize that although we might see the general stages as linear across ages, this doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to follow through for everything that children are doing creatively. We still might be 5, 6, 7, older when we're in the exploration phase, because oftentimes when we are being creative, we are practicing and acquiring and using our imagination with new founded skills. And so I could still be in the exploration phase if I have never mixed colors before to create a new medium, and this is fascinating for me. And so I might be really interwoven in investigating the properties of that. But just wanted to make that note that although they're general stages of creativity and they in some ways align with the ages, children still could be exploring or utilizing non-representation with that freedom of process at older ages as well. And so you'll see that around 4 years old, children are starting to engage in more representational art. And as I mentioned in previous lectures, as children are getting older, we're just seeing more improvement and emphasis on the same skills, but with higher intensity and abilities to produce, representations using various materials. And then around 5 years old, really getting more into the creation, the designing, the directing of their own dramatic play, and using their voices for their own ideas. Okay, so now I'm gonna spotlight some drawing skills, and you'll also see that on slide 22 and 23, we're talking a little bit more about those drawing skills just in the form of pictures. And so around 4 years old, children are starting to be able to draw figures, and they might make straight or curved marks on their papers and begin to draw lines. And then they'll start to have the beginnings of representational artwork with their paintings or drawings that suggest the people or animals or objects in their life. And around 5 years old, we're just able to see more detail, more control of line and shape work, more representations in better detail. And so on slide 22, Lowenfeld and Edwards, they're showing the popular drawing scale development of young children in their representational drawings. And you'll even see that around 4 years old, a child has drawn a human body and x-ray of what's inside the body. And then you'll see just more detail throughout the years beyond just the preschool years, so goes up until about 10 years old. And there's just more detail in the shading and what the actual picture represents. And then same with the stages of drawing development on 23, the types of ways that children will start to utilize the formation of those basic lines and the dots and circles, and then they'll start to combine those different scribbles. Then they might even start to represent the combination of scribbles to create suns, and then even beyond that, they're creating detailed suns with faces, and then pictures of people, and then adding arms and legs. So it just gets progressively more detailed, and we're clearly able to see their depictions of people, animals, and objects. Alrighty, so last but not least, I did just want to touch on promoting creative development, and your text does a great job of discussing this in more detail, but it's really important that we think about our role in supporting children and how to help them to have more experiences for creative processes and using their imagination. And so one way that we can do this is giving children enough time. Children need opportunities to get deeply involved in their play. And when children are deeply involved in their play, they're able to think more creatively and use their imaginations more. And so some ways that we actually might do this are not only by providing enough time, but giving children open-ended and expressive materials and thinking about our classroom setup. So many different ways that we can do this directly, and then also behind the scenes in just our setup of everything. So we want children to have areas for music and art, dramatic play, and loose parts. So I included a quick 1-minute video just to show you what loose parts looks like and how this can support creative processes for children. So emphasis on process over product. So when we emphasize the process, we're emphasizing the time that children get to spend, the way that they get to utilize materials. It's truly child-led, giving them the opportunity to do whatever they want with the materials in whatever time span they have. So giving them lots of Play-Doh, lots of different mediums to paint with or create artwork with. So it's all about the process for them. And if you're interested, I do have more on loose parts. Check out the loose parts books. If you just type in loose parts, there's so many different beautiful ways that children can use loose parts in a classroom. And again, setting up your classroom to enhance creativity should be in all areas, in your constructive area, in your dramatic play area, in that sensory bin, indoors and outdoors. Both environments are key for helping children to thrive creatively, and that also means making your environments natural and beautiful. When we're in beautiful spaces, it helps to fuel our imagination and support our creative thinking. And so we want to emphasize aesthetics and beauty in our natural spaces, making that classroom more inviting. I loved when I worked at the Infant and Toddler Care Center and I was able to design my classroom. And I remember I went out after a big windstorm and collected a bunch of um, branches that had fallen off of the tree, and I hung them from the ceiling, and I added beads and leaves, and you can add really anything that you would like, and it just created a sense of peace. And I'm sure that we think about this when we're designing our own rooms or our own aesthetics within our clothing, or whatever space you're in. We all have our own ideas of how our spaces can be beautiful. And so really allowing nature to be embedded within your classroom spaces and your outdoor spaces to support children's creativity. And then just again, that emphasis on those videos that I had you watch for the TED Talks, and the importance of reducing direct instruction and pushing for early academics too on. We really want to give children opportunities to utilize all their creative juices that they have flowing. And if we push children too early, this can really limit them in their social emotional development and their creativity. So we just want to support children in the best way that we can and give them opportunities to explore the world in ways that make sense for them, and give them the chance to come up with ideas, problem solve on their own, and use their imagination. So I hope that you enjoyed today's lecture, and I will talk to you next time. Bye, everyone. Thank you.